I think a lot of people have, if not maybe most people, have heard the Uilleann pipes. They've heard them in movies and on TV, but they don't know that they've heard them, you know? They don't know what it is. And I think, you know, a majority of those people are going to say, well, they're bagpipes. And they're not going to know that they're Irish bagpipes. They're very unique. So I think, yeah, my message would be to just that, here they are. This is what this is. Every pipe makes at least one note. The drone simply makes one note. This is the bass drum, which is the largest, longest, lowest pitched drum. It's pitched 3 octaves below the smallest drum. This is the baritone drum, and this is the tenor drum. So there's 3 octaves of the note D. These keyed pipes here are called regulators. So while the player is playing, he or she will use their hand or arm to produce chords that accompany the melody of the chanter. This is the chanter. It has a wooden chanter top. Inside here is where the reed is. There's no reed inside this one. And we use woods that are a little bit more accessible these days, more affordable, and don't really sacrifice the tonal quality. So our current sort of popular wood is a wood called Cadillacs. It's also called Mexican Royal Ebony. And it's similar to ebony in that it's dark in color, but it's much cheaper, it's much more accessible, and it's not regulated by any of the government agencies that regulate exotic woods, so we can ship it anywhere in the world without any trouble. And then we have a wood called bubinga, which we make drones and regulators out of, and it's a little bit lighter in color. It's fabulous to work with. It's the right combination of soft and hard, and it finishes beautifully. The bag is made out of leather. This is a cowhide bag, and it's saddle stitched, which means the needles go through the same hole like this, making a figure 8. And that's important because the holes are sealed by the thread as they go through. So the bag is airtight even though it's sewn together. And this is a bellows, which is 2 wooden clappers that are nailed to a piece of leather, and it has a one-way valve on it, so it just pumps air. It's quite a setup, and it's quite challenging to keep the whole thing up and running and going.
How about some jigs?
Yeah. This is a piece of cane I use for chanter reeds. This comes from Spain. So the entire sound of the pipe starts with this tube right here. This is a pretty typical Finnish Chana reed. Has the date written on it. The date is important because the reeds tend to settle in over a period of time. So you have a beautiful working reed, and then about 3 weeks later it's gone completely to hell. So they have to be made so that the aperture is much wider, much more open, and over time they settle in like this. It's the time is the critical factor. You're really not going to see the most permanent behavior from it for 3 to 4 weeks after you make it. So you can imagine what kind of a pain in the butt that is. Here's a wooden reed made out of cedar. The wood is cut in such a way that all of that stuff I just talked about really doesn't apply, because it's so stable once it's cut that you really don't have to worry about any of that stuff. The dimensions are different, the feel is different, and basically I think pretty much anybody who's using this wood right now is in an experimental stage with this stuff right now. I think that once we reach a point where the tone is the same with this material, that's going to be the breaking point. So there's only like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's only 3 basic chords here: D, G, and C. There's another regulator down here at the bottom. The keys are sticking on that one, so I'm not playing that one. I have it turned out of the way. My elbow is attached to the bellows with this belt right here, and there's a tube that goes through the bottom. The tube goes all the way over to the bag and inflates the bag with air, and the air goes into the channel. And then there's a reed in here, which I won't take out because I don't want to jinx it. But and that's pretty much it. But I'm sort of balancing the air pressure for all the various reeds. There's 3 other pipes down here at the bottom called drones, and they are each pitched in an octave of D. They're continuous when they're on, so I turn them on and off with the little switch right here. Some of the notes require the channer to be on the back of your, or on your knee, and if it's not on your knee, the note will be thrown out of tune, like this note here. Sometimes you want that for an effect, but generally it's on and off the knee. So there's quite a bit of stuff going on here with this thing. And if you're not familiar with what it's supposed to sound like, I don't know how you could possibly play this thing. We have this machine right here, which is a 3D printer. It works like it extrudes plastic through a very hot point, and pretty much make anything you want from it. We mainly use it for a few of the parts that are sort of like the mechanical parts that we would have made by hand. Like this guy right here goes at your waist like this, and this is where the bellows comes out and connects to the bag. It's also helpful for building drone reeds. Drone reeds traditionally were made out of cane, which is the same thing that I make channer reeds out of. But you can imagine what a nightmare it is when this thing starts to change with the humidity and temperature changes. These newer reeds here don't go through so much change after they're made. They're very stable, so it saves a ton of time. My wife came up with these 2 parts that internally there's a 3D printed U bend inside of the plastic. So in the sound, it sounds pretty good so far. And these two little parts basically take a very complex system here and consolidate it into 3D printed parts into a smaller space, and saves a lot of labor. This is another machine we have here, which is a CNC router. I'll start with one of these, put it in the lathe, turn it, bore it out, and you end up with this. It has a hole through the middle. And then we take it to the CNC machine over there, and the CNC machine turns it into this. And then I'll finish it at the lathe, hand turning it. And then it'll go back to the CNC machine, and the CNC machine will drill all of these holes, carve the key slots, and carve away anything that is not supposed to be there. This will be at the end of the bass drum. This metal part will eventually be fitted on here like this. But I'm going to leave it sit for, maybe a couple weeks before I fit this guy on here.
How long does it take you to make a pipe, a complete set from beginning to end?
Well, it takes months because the wood, once the wood is bored out, it has to season. So really the answer is the longer the better. I think that if the wood settles for a few months, 3 months or so after it's bored out, that's a pretty good working time. I like to play. In a perfect world where that paid the bills, that's probably what I would focus on. But this gets it done in the financial department. So I don't have an operating set of bagpipes right now, personally. So that's a big drawback. The truth is that that I've become so particular about what I want to play on that I'm not sure I would be happy until I get that. And that could be ego, but I think it's important because it is driving this whole operation, is to get that sound and that one perfect set of pipes where everything is matched up and the reeds are perfect and, You can imagine what it must have been like in the old country when they were doing this. There's no electricity. Those guys who made pipes back in the early part of last century and then into this one before, they must have been highly, highly skilled individuals. If you think about the sort of like the socioeconomic place where they lived and stuff, their skill set must have been out of this world because of all of the different things that go into making one of these things. This is I really like doing this job. This is called silver soldering. But I'm going to contradict myself and say I hate it, because I do have a love-hate relationship with it. It's sort of like welding for the scaredy cat. There are a bunch of joints where you have to do that on the pipes. Anywhere where there's a metal joint going into another metal joint, you got to do that. So there's silversmithing, there's turning, there's metalwork, there's reed work. My wife's a mechanical engineer, so we use the computer a lot. Between 3D printing and the CNC machine, both of our computer skills have been increased quite a bit. The Uilleann pipes are made in several different keys, and we have one that's pitched in B, which is much lower. And the kids, for whatever reason,
I think it's just the overall volume,
volume
is greater, and that's been like that since they were babies. Like, concert pitch in the house is a no-go, like, for babies and toddlers, and even now, like, if they're doing something, it's intrusive. But we could play the flat pitch pipes in the kitchen all day and it would never bother them.
yeah,
So you don't have any regulators on that?
not on this set. One thing I've learned is that you reach a certain point and playing the instrument becomes the most important thing, because you're going to spend a lot of labor and time building things, and if you're not building something that you would personally want to play, you're wasting your time, I think. If you really want to make the best stuff, you have to have a goal or a ideal sound, and I've had that since the beginning. But to reach that point where your skill set is able to get that sound can take a while, and it's taken me 13 years. For me, it was that I wanted that bright, wide, chirpy, fat tone, and maybe that's probably not what everybody wants. It's certainly not popular today in the Uilleann pipes. This is a cane reed that I was playing on really this morning before you got here, and that's pretty typical of a reed that I make. It's extremely long compared to many of the standards reeds that people make these days, but I find that the tone is so much better if the reed is longer. So this guy really sounds. The demand for pipes, I think, has gone up and up and up, but it has not receded at all. I think the best makers these days are completely backlogged, and they have waiting lists that are completely, they sound humorous when they tell you what their waiting list is. 15 years for a set of bagpipes. I've heard stories of people ordering pipes for their children when they're born, to get on the pipe maker's waiting list. Well, you order a set of pipes and then you start on the tin whistle. That's what I did. And then while you're learning the whistle, you learn tunes on the whistle, and then they're pretty much translate over. Then you have to learn the pressure of the bag and make sure that you learn that. That's the hardest part in the beginning. I used to have my brother press the bellows while I pressed the bag. And I said, "Here, let's see if we can make a noise with this thing." You have to have the pressure right. And I play with a pretty hard pressure, I think. Some people don't play as hard. And it does make a difference. I think that there may have been more happening with this instrument than is documented, or that was passed down. I think oral tradition has played a big role in what we know about the pipes. And frankly, I think that there is a lot that happened with it, and where it came from, and who worked on it, and how this thing evolved. It's so complex. To try to go in there and make one from scratch. So I believe that there was a lot more happening than is documented or commonly understood about the pipes. I think there were more people working on them, for sure. And I think that there's a lot that we don't know about where they came from. If you listen to the sound of the pipes, I can't think of any other word to describe it than miraculous. Because to make the bore, the shape, and the reed, to have a reed that works inside of a pipe with those dimensions, where the reamer is placed just that far, that is to me a sign that this musical instrument is supposed to exist.
It's what?
It's supposed to exist. It is a beautiful thing. That it in its essence was already there before they started working on it. Now I know that's pretty heavy philosophical thing, but I just the sound of it is so unique and so beautiful and so enchanting. People have called it the sound of Irishness or the sound of Ireland. In the Gaelic language, they have certain words to describe what the spirit of the music and the essence of the magical quality that comes through when somebody's playing that slow air in a group of people. Everybody is silent and listening, you know, that there truly is it's this powerful experience for people. And the sound is part of that. And I'm not a Gaelic scholar, but the Irish have words, and they recognize this. Of course they do. You couldn't walk away from that and not recognize that, you know, that specialness.